Today we have an informational meeting, quite a bit of really good information, and we'll continue that process again. Reminder that we have 2 meetings this month, and we've scheduled 2 for each of the next 5 months. So we're getting down to some business, and particularly right now, we're learning some of the key things that we'll be taking into consideration as we develop our plan. So let's start by getting an approval of our November 9th, which is our last meeting minutes. Has everyone had a chance to look at those? And if so, can you please let me know if you'd like to adjust or approve those. All right, I'm not hearing anyone, so you're either good or you've decided that you like them so much that we should approve them by acclamation.
So, Mr. Chair, this is Jamie Colley. I'll move to approve the minutes.
Thank you, Jamie.
This is Dale Calvert. I'll move to second.
You're good. Moved and seconded to approve the minutes. Are there any changes or typos or other corrections? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 All right, any opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. Chair, I am abstaining because I was not at the last meeting.
Okay, thank you, Joanne. All right, let's move into our full agenda. We have a couple of really good presentations to begin with. These are all things today that we as a committee have requested to learn more about and to get into some conversations about. So we're going to start with Paki, and Paki will be introducing our first speaker.
Thank you, Tom. And good morning, everyone. Nice to see many of you. This part of the agenda will be divided into 2 presentations today. The first part will be an overview of the Making Action Possible, known as MAP dashboard, presented by Jennifer Poland. She will go over the comparison communities and why MAP is using those communities to compare from an economic perspective, as well as an overview of the dashboard. And then after that, I will review the transportation investments of the various community comparison communities. So first, I want to introduce Jennifer. Jennifer Poland is a senior research economist in the Economic and Business Research Center at the U of A. She's over in the Eller College of Management, and she's also a project manager and analyst for the Making Action Possible, which is the MAP dashboard. Jennifer holds a Bachelor of Science in Economics and a Master of Science in Agricultural and Resource Economics from the U of A. Prior to joining the Economics and Business Research Center, Jennifer was the coordinator for the program on economics law and the environment. She also taught the role of markets and incentives and economic statistics at the University of Arizona, as well as micro and macroeconomics at Pima Community College. I met Jennifer when I joined the MAP Advisory Board, and she and her team have been invaluable to the U of A and Eller College. So I would like now to hand this over to Jennifer.
Thank you, Paki. I'm going to start with a slideshow here, and I will screen share. And please let me know if you guys cannot see it. Just one moment. I've lost my controls. 4. Just one moment. Let's see. Are you able to see the slideshow?
Yes, we can see it, Jennifer.
Great, thank you. Well, I want to thank Farhad and Paki for inviting me to join you today to discuss the Making Action Possible dashboard. The MAP dashboard's mission is to measurably improve Southern Arizona through data-driven collective civic action and education. The MAP website provides users with indicators that measure our region's progress on a wide range of socioeconomic measures. It is a place where our engaged community members, business leaders, government officials, and nonprofits can find a common collection of information upon which to evaluate our community and collaborate to address our shared issues. Just to note that we've had over 500,000 page views on the MAP dashboard since we launched in 2014. So it is a well-used website with lots of engagement. Additionally, we compare Tucson to several Western metropolitan areas to gain an understanding of how our region compares today. And we'll talk about that, those regions and those comparisons in depth in a little bit. We'll also talk about how the map came about, and we'll explore a few of the map indicators that are related to or directly impacted by infrastructure, transportation, investment. So the map dashboard launched in December of 2014, and the initial partners included the Southern Arizona Leadership Council, the Community Foundation for Southern Arizona, and the University of Arizona. Pima Association of Governments and Sun Corridor later joined that partnership. We also have had several long-term community sponsors, Tucson Electric Power, the Thomas R. Brown Family Foundation, and Freeport McMoran Foundation. Without our partners and sustaining sponsor support, the MAP dashboard as it is today would not be possible. The map is housed at the University of Arizona in the Economic and Business Research Center in the Eller College of Management. Before we dig into—
Jennifer?
Yeah?
Jennifer, real quick, we're seeing your presentation in presentation mode. If you can share.
Yep, let me try.
If you, okay.
Yeah, I can just share my other screen. It's just, one moment. Sorry about that. Okay, do you see that better now as a large presentation? Okay.
That's perfect. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, before we move to the live website demo where we'll explore the indicators and the regions that we look at on the MAP dashboard, I want to acknowledge the MAP's media sponsor, the Arizona Daily Star. The Arizona Daily Star publishes 2 MAP features each month, one on the homepage, front page of the business section, the last Sunday of each month. And that's this image that you see here with the fuel gauge. We're always highlighting one of our economic or workforce and demographic fuel gauges and the most recent information that we have available for that. And then they also post a map feature on the front page of the health section the first Monday of each month. And that's this other image you'll see, a health related feature. So you can check those out. Again, last Sunday of each month for the business section and first Monday of the month for the health section. So before we go into the website and dig into a kind of those core indicators that we have, I wanted to talk about some of the feature articles that we have on the MAP dashboard. We have a wide selection of content in addition to our core indicators. We have 36 core indicators across 6 categories, but we write 2 to 3 feature articles each month. And this has allowed us to kind of dig deeper and expand the kind of content that we provide on the MAP dashboard and kind of stay up to date with what's going on in our region. For example, we were able to pivot to writing COVID-related articles in March of this year. And you can see a few examples of that here. COVID-19 impacts food insecurity for children. How exposed are Tucson's industries to a COVID-19 recession? So these are articles that really don't fit, content that doesn't really fit into our core indicators, but are of importance to our community. And I'll show you where you can find all of these articles in just a few moments when we go to the website. And I do want to mention these COVID-related articles, both healthcare related and economic articles have been very popular on the MAP dashboard. In 2020, we saw our usage of the website and the number of users visiting double from 2019. So this has been very popular content. And then here, I wanted to note this, we have a MAP newsletter. If you haven't already subscribed for it, I know many of you have. But those of you who haven't, we have a monthly newsletter. It's a great way to stay up to date on upcoming webinars that we have, new feature articles, and data releases. We update data all the time on the MAP dashboard. There's always something new, whether it's a feature article or a data update. For example, we just updated about 1/3 of the MAP indicators, many of which we're going to talk about today, right before Christmas, the holiday. So about 1/3 of the data is recently updated. And then we also recently added a high frequency data update that allows us to track the COVID-19 impacts in a monthly data. So this is updated monthly when the new monthly data comes out. And so I'll show you where to find those. So I'm going to switch now to the MAP website. Can you guys see the MAP website? Can you give me a thumbs up if you can see it? All right, excellent. So here is the MAP website. You can see we have our core indicators divided into 6 different categories. We have economy, education, health and social well-being, infrastructure, quality of place, and workforce and demographics. And these, as you hover over each of those 6 icons, you get a drop-down menu that shows you the 6 different indicators. So for example, employment share, labor force participation, occupational wages are in the workforce and demographics category. So you can find each of those, and I'm going to show you several examples of kind of infrastructure, transportation related indicators in a few moments. Below that, we have a rotating slideshow. This is where you can find some of those feature articles, the more recent feature articles that we've published on the MAP dashboard. Just down a little bit more, this is where you find the most recent feature article. So this will change, this image here will change 2 to 3 times a month. Click on that and get the most recent feature article that we've published on the MAP dashboard. This one looked into some of the impacts of COVID-19 on households from the Census Bureau's household pulse survey that they're releasing each week. And next to that, in Explore Your County, you can click on this, you can get a county map and get some great kind of high level statistical information at the county level, compare and contrast the different counties in the state, things like population, employment growth, median household income, kind of those key indicators. Here you can find that high frequency data, and then in this box you can enter your name and email address, and we'll send you that monthly newsletter. Next to that, you'll find this worth noting section. This is just kind of a running tally of what we've updated recently on the website. So you'll find those data updates, recent feature articles listed here, and then we are on Twitter. So if you are on Twitter, we encourage you to follow MAP AZ dashboard. And so let's kind of dig in to the categories and the indicators and look at some of those kind of indicators that are really, that I think that you guys will find interesting, that kind of are impacted, have an impact directly or indirectly on infrastructure investment, transportation investment. So we're going to start here in economy. I'm going to click on that economy icon, and it's going to take me to this overview page. And this overview page is a great way to go and see how Tucson compares to other metropolitan areas across our 6 categories. It's kind of a snapshot. It provides you the most recent data and that snapshot of how Tucson's doing relative to our peer communities. And so we have 11 other peer metropolitan areas that we compare Tucson to: Albuquerque, Austin, Colorado Springs, Denver, El Paso, Las Vegas, Phoenix, Portland, Salt Lake City, San Antonio, and San Diego. These are all metropolitan areas that are similar to Tucson in some regard. They have a similar population level or demographic mix, a large research university, a large military installation. Phoenix's case, they're up the road. We want to compare the 2 large metropolitan areas in Arizona to each other. And also, these metropolitan areas are the regions that Sun Corridor compares to for economic development purposes when looking at attracting businesses to Tucson. So when we started the MAP dashboard back in 2014, we held a series of meetings, and we invited experts from our 6 categories to come and talk to us about what indicators should be included on the MAP dashboard, but also what regions they felt Tucson was comparable to. Who are our peers? Who are the cities that we kind of aspire to be like? And these are the 11 other metropolitan areas that came out of those meetings. And we compare them across all 36 of our core indicators. We look at these metropolitan areas compared to Tucson. So if we go up to the scorecard, we can see business growth, for example, was 1.8% between 2018 and 2019. We're going to explore this indicator in depth in a moment, but this is looking at the change in establishments. So we had a 1.8% growth in establishments in 2019. You can see that thunderstorm icon. That means we actually ranked last. We're actually tied for last with 2 other metropolitan areas when we compare to our peers. But that was a recent change, was an increase. Housing affordability, we'll talk about in a moment, 71.2%. We have a high percentage of homes that are affordable in the Tucson metropolitan area relative to our peers. We have a sun icon, meaning we ranked in the top 3rd. That sun icon, the top 3rd, partly sunny in the middle 3rd, cloudy in the bottom 3rd. And that thunderstorm icon, it means we ranked last. So these scorecards, we have one for each of our 6 categories. They're a great way to kind of look at a quick snapshot of how Tucson does relative to these 11 metropolitan areas. So let's click on business growth and take a look at one of the indicators that I thought you might find interesting. So this is the establishment. This is the growth rate in business establishments, 1.8% for Tucson compared to Las Vegas, tied with Las Vegas and El Paso in 2019. You can see this outer ring here is telling you that that was an improvement. So in 2018, we had no growth, and that improved to 1.8% in 2019. We're just behind the US here. We're always going to benchmark back to the US. And then this is how we compare relative to our peers. So we see Phoenix here leading the way, Phoenix metropolitan area at 5.8%. I think it's worth noting that we're talking about metropolitan areas here, not cities. So this is all metropolitan. So it's the whole metropolitan area, which is defined at the county level by the census. So when we talk about the Tucson metro, that is the same geographic region as Pima County. Phoenix Metro is both Maricopa and Pinal counties combined. And so all of these are at a single or multiple county level when we talk about a metropolitan area. Our summary pages, as you see here, they have a lot of content. We want to provide information to the user about why this indicator is important, why should we measure it, why, what does it mean for Tucson? And then we want to disaggregate that data as much as we possibly can to really get a sense of what's going on within our community across various groups or industries, and then how do we compare to those other metropolitan areas, both in the short term, but also over the long run. So we want to include that trend information for all of our metros so we can see, are we making progress? Are we falling behind relative to our peers? Before we talk about the trend, I'll mention here that we have for business growth, both the starts, the closures, the expansion, and the contraction data. On the comparison page, I'll show you. So you see this data is a little bit older. It takes a little bit longer for the census data to compile all of the starts, contractions, expansions, data by industry, but you can see in 2016 that of the new establishments, that business and professional services represented 22%. And if we scroll down, we have our trend data. So all of these graphs are interactive. You can click on and off geographies. If we wanted to just look at Tucson, we can click off Arizona, click off US, hover over and get that data point for each of the years. So you can see here during the Great Recession, we had a decline in business establishments and improvement since the Great Recession here at 1.8% in 2019. So now I want to go into the comparison page because this is where you can find all of that data. So we have data for those 11 other metropolitan areas, all 15 Arizona counties, and 10 Western states. So if you go here, you can see we have data for the US, the 10 Western states, all these basically Washington through Texas. All of those 11 metropolitan areas are listed here alphabetically, and then all 15 Arizona counties. And while these geographies are grayed out, all you need to do is click on and off of them to get that data to generate for you. Up here, we have that drop-down menu, so you can look at starts or closures. That graph will regenerate for you with the closure data, look at contractions. And then if you want to download the data or to take it, to save an image of this graph, you can go in here and you can save an image. You can download the actual data points. It's worth noting that if you do not, you have to click on the geographies that you're interested in to download those data points. So if you want all of the geographies, click on all of the geographies. The graph will look like a mess, but you can download all of that data for all 38 of those different geographies at one time. But if you were just interested in, say, US, Arizona, Tucson, just have those geographies clicked on and download just those data points on here. And we encourage you to use these images, all of the images on the map dashboard for your own purposes, put them in your presentations, your reports, and use them as necessary. This is a free resource for our community, and we encourage everyone to use it. So let's now skip over to employment growth and look at what's been going on in employment growth. And you can see here in 2019, 1.9%, that was an improvement over 2018. Tucson ranks in the middle, but kind of towards the bottom of the middle, higher than the US at 1.4%. Austin leads the way here at 3.8%. Here we have a little bit of the information for the Western states. You can see that the growth rate in total employment for all of the Western states is higher than the US in 2019. You can look at the trend information for Tucson, Arizona, and US. You can see here that sharp decline during the Great Recession, followed by an improvement, while Tucson did not grow quite as rapidly as the state did. And then if we go to the comparison page, we have all of the industry data. So as I mentioned before, we like to disaggregate this data as much as possible. And so we have all of our industry data here. And you can go in and you can look at, say, trade, transportation, and utilities, for example. And it may take a moment to generate because we have all of those 38 geographies, but here is the trade, transportation, and utilities growth rate over the last 20 years for all 38 of our geographies. And again, you can click on and off those geographies to learn more information about that. I also thought you would be interested in housing affordability, and I'm going through these quickly. If you have questions at the end, I'm happy to dig in a little bit deeper into the indicators, any of the indicators we have in the map dashboard or articles, and talk about it. So here we can see Tucson's housing affordability at 71.2%. This means that of the single family homes sold, 71.2% of those homes were affordable to someone earning the median family income. Median family income is in that $60,000 range for Tucson in 2019. We're just behind Albuquerque, and we saw an improvement between 2018 and 2019. Housing affordability is essentially made up of the home price, the median price of homes being sold, and income. So what this tells us is, while we know that home prices increased between 2018 and 2019, wages also increased. So wages increased enough to offset those increase in the home price. So we saw an increase in our affordability. You can go down. We have some of the quarterly data. You can see how up until about third quarter of 2018, affordability was declining. And that is because we really didn't see wages start to increase until about late 2018, 2019, which is when wages started to increase, and then housing affordability started to increase as well. And the last indicator we'll talk about here in the economy category is median household income. This is a different measure than family income. It's slightly lower, 53,000 for Tucson, just here ahead of El Paso, still kind of towards the bottom when we're talking about comparing to our peer metropolitan areas, and below the US, that benchmark almost $10,000 below the US median household income in 2019, but an improvement from 2014, about $7,000 or so there. And then this is where we really are going to disaggregate all of that data to see if there's anything that stands out for Tucson compared to our peers, compared to the US and to the state. So we disaggregate it by race and ethnicity. One thing here that stands out is that a huge difference in the Asian population's median household income, 55,000 for Tucson Metro, but 88,000 for the US and 78,000 for the state. So this is where we really start to kind of get down into that nitty gritty and look at what's going on in that detailed data. We also look at it by age, median household income by age. We can see our 65 plus age group here better off in terms of median household income than their US peers, slightly better. We break it down by family. And then again, we look at that trend information. Here you can see that big bump up right before the Great Recession, followed by that decline. And then a slow increase in income up until about 2016, when we saw some sharp increases. And again, if we go to that comparison page, we have all of that disaggregated data available for all of those 38 geographies as well. So you can go in here and you can look at something like age, and you can look at it for how does Albuquerque compare to Tucson, how does Portland compare to Tucson, or any of the Western states. Let's now jump over to infrastructure. And here, I think the indicator that you guys will find the most interesting, especially kind of in this COVID-19 era, is this transportation to work. So we're highlighting people that drove alone at 76.8% in Tucson. It has been increasing. That percentage has been increasing. We rank in the middle third compared to pure metros, but let's just go ahead and skip to that indicator, and you'll see Here, when we get to the summary page with all the content, we highlight the percentage of residents bicycling to work. Tucson does really well. As you all know, we have great, wonderful infrastructure for bicyclists in Tucson. So 1.5% of those commuting to work do it by bicycle. That's a little lower than Portland, but way ahead of many of our peer communities and the US. We'll scroll down. We looked at the percentage of commuters that drove alone, broken out by metropolitan area in 2019, and that was 76.8%, kind of falling in the middle there of our peer metros. And then we have all of the different categories for mode of transportation to work, highlighting both Tucson, Arizona, and the US here. Drove alone, carpool, public transportation, walked, biked, other mode, and this would be like taxi cab, took a taxi cab, worked from home. And so this one's interesting right now because so many of us are working from home, worked from home the last 9 months and will continue to. We see that in 2019, 5.4% of residents in Tucson worked from home. There's been some surveys that have gone around to individuals that have been working from home for the last 9 months. And those surveys are showing that about 20 to 25% of individuals want to continue to work from home. And once the COVID-19 pandemic has ended, about 50 to 60% want to kind of have a mix, work from home a few days a week, go into the office a few days a week. I think that would definitely be my preference. Many of you probably know I've been working remotely for several years now, and I miss the office often. So I come back to Tucson frequently and work in the office a bit. So I think I fall kind of in that 50 to 60% range. And then 20 to 25% of people want to be in the office all the time. So it will be interesting to see what happens once the COVID-19 pandemic is over. The results that have come out of the surveys to CEOs are a little bit more mixed and not quite as clear what the CEOs want. Are we going to see a more flexible workplace in the future, or are we going to go back to that traditional office 5 days a week? So we'll continue to track this data and the survey information that comes out on the MAP dashboard. We'll have an upcoming feature article that will look at work from home and the trends in work from home over the last couple of years. I will tell you, if we look at Tucson's work from home percentage, and we can look at it on the comparison page in a moment, it's actually low relative to its peer metropolitan areas. Some of the peer metropolitan areas are around that 7 to 8% range prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. In this particular indicator, we also look at commuters that drove alone. This has been increasing. You can see here in 2000, it was 73.8%. It increased to 76.8%. If you look at that carpooling, that has gone down, especially right now. Carpooling, we would expect that carpooling trends have really plummeted in the last year. We look at the commute time. Commute time has increased by 1 minute over the last 20 years. So we saw a commute time in Tucson of 23.9 in 2000, and it is now 24.9 in 2019. And we just updated this data. We just got this data in December, and all of this data is just recently updated. Tucson's commute time is a little bit less than Tucson or the state, or than the US or the state. So if we go here, and I just wanted to show you that comparison data for the work from home, where Austin, which also has another large university, click on and off here, and we'll click on some of our geographies. We see that Austin's way up at 8.8%, I think. There's our metros. So we see 8.8% for Austin work from home, Colorado Springs 7%, Denver 8%, Phoenix 7%, Portland 7.4%, Salt Lake City 6%, and San Diego 7%. So Tucson really was low compared to those peers prior to the COVID-19. You can look at, you have the carpooling here, public transportation. Portland really stands out here. Many of you probably know that Portland's got a really good metro system. They have a high percentage of individuals using public transportation as well as walking and biking. So all of this information is available here for you to explore, to download, and to use. And then lastly, we'll just go into workforce and demographics real quickly, because there's two indicators that are really important, I think, for both transportation and infrastructure investment. And one is population. It's important to understand both the demographic mix of the region, also what does the population growth look like, what are those kind of projections for the future, and then what does your industrial mix look like in your region, and those are important. So we'll start with that employment share by industry, which shows you your industrial mix. Tucson's fairly similar to the US, except for in government. We have a large percentage of government employees at almost 20% of our employment's in government. 2% of that is military compared to the US, which is at 14.8, and the state, which is at 14.2. So that's really the only notable significant difference between Tucson and the US in terms of our industrial mix. And I want to show you that we actually have a ton of information here in the comparison page, because we break this out both by industry. So you can go in here, and if you want to look at something like construction, you can look at construction shares across all of the different metropolitan areas and states. We unfortunately don't have county level data for this, but you can look at, what percentage of jobs are in construction across your metros there. But you can also then go down here and look at what is the actual industrial mix for each region. And let's just pick Las Vegas, because here, you see that large percentage of leisure and hospitality in Las Vegas at 28%, substantially larger than any of our other pure metropolitan areas. So two different ways to explore this kind of industrial mix information on the map dashboard. And then I'll leave you with population. And that's because this is important for planning, for future planning. We see that Tucson's population growth was 1% in 2019, up slightly from 2018, about half percentage point ahead of the US. And we have that broken down by age. So you can look at, Tucson's population. The share of population in Tucson for the 65 plus group is almost 20%, substantially higher than the US share, 65%. We break that down by ethnicity. And then we also look at that growth rate. So you can see, the US growth has been declining slightly over time, but Tucson and Arizona's growth has historically here, the last 20 years been above the US growth rate, with the exception of the downturn here during the Great Recession, when we really took some serious hits in population, both in the state and the metropolitan area. And before we open it up to questions, each of our core indicators has this how is it measured section. And this tells you where we got the data from. Did we do any calculations or manipulations to the data? Did we scale it in any way? And if we did, what data did we use to scale it? So kind of all of that detailed information about where the data comes from can be found in these how is it measured sections. Some are short and some are a little bit more detailed if there's methodology involved in our calculations. So that's all the prepared remarks I have, but I'm happy to answer questions, show you other indicators on the map dashboard if there's interest.
Thanks, Jennifer. Really interesting. I'm pretty sure that most of us have become aware of the map dashboard, but the richness, I think, of the data in it is always amazing to me.
Thank you, Tom.
Any questions for Jennifer?
Tom, this is Arlen. Can I look at the quality of place just to see?
Oh, yeah, actually, I meant to speak. I meant to actually show you two of the quality of place indicators. Which one did you want to look at?
I can only see part of them, so.
Oh, yes, we have air quality, cost of living. I meant to discuss briefly here, air quality and cost of living.
Yeah, I think those are the two that I'd like to look at real quick. Okay,
great. So we'll start with air quality. And here you can see Tucson does relatively well compared to its peers. 61.6% were considered good air quality days in 2019. That was an improvement from 2018. We are behind Portland, Colorado Springs, and Austin. We do break this down into a little bit more detail. Here on the summary page, we combine good and moderate and unhealthy for sensitive groups and unhealthy. We separate that out on the comparison page. I'll show you in a moment. We can look at each of those categories individually. You can click on and off these. So if you just wanted to see unhealthy and very unhealthy, this graph would regenerate. You'll see that of the days in 2019 that were measured, and it's all we have data for every single day. So 12% for Phoenix were unhealthy, and 2.7% were very unhealthy in Tucson. 0.5% of the day, 0.5% of the days were unhealthy. And then down here, you have that trend information for our metros. And if we go to the comparison page, I actually prefer this stack bar chart because it's got it all broken down by each of the individual categories. And you could look at just good days, or you could look at good and moderate for the MSAs. And we have data for the counties here in that second graph. And then we have the trend information for both the counties and the metropolitan areas here. So you can look at, Tucson's trend over time. And you can see it ranged from 91% that were good and moderate. That was the low in 2003 to a high, I think 99.7% were good and moderate in 2015. Okay, and if we switch over to cost of living, we actually have a really low cost of living relative to our pure metropolitan areas. We're the second lowest compared to those 11 other metros here. It's 6.9% below the nation. Only El Paso is lower. So this is and I meant to mention, this is a good thing because this helps to attract individuals to our region. So one reason that we see population growth over the US, higher than the US. And San Diego here at 17.9% compared to the US. We do break this down by different categories. We have goods, rents, and other services. Goods includes things like your typical expenditures on groceries, food, vehicles. Rents includes both homeowner costs and rental cost. So we see goods at 7% below the US, rents at almost 15% below the US. This goes back to looking at, housing affordability and things like that. Kind of all ties together. We see that rents are low. We see housing affordability is high. And other services, these are kind of your financial, legal, health services, slightly below the US at just less than 1%. We also explore the rate of inflation over time using the implicit regional price deflator here. We just do that for Tucson and Arizona. And then if you go to that comparison page, we have those categories broken down for the cost of living for each of our pure metropolitan areas in our states. Again, we unfortunately don't have data at the county level for this particular indicator. So those are the two, I think, interesting quality of place indicators.
Let me ask a quick follow-up. So cost of living will address housing income in comparison to what those costs are. Like, for example, housing, if we were to look at the current numbers, which are not available relative to these charts, we would be seeing housing costs going up fairly considerably. When you look at the rents are going up and the cost of purchasing a house is going up, at least in existing houses. And I'm just, but yet our salary level doesn't seem to be going up as much. So I think we're
right
the wrong way there. But we don't necessarily know that from looking at this yet because we don't have that data, just like we don't have COVID data yet.
Right, exactly. So there are a few things here. So the housing affordability does help to tell that story about wages and home prices, because that basically is made up of just what is the median sales price of a home, and then what is the median family income, and what percentage of homes that were sold are affordable to someone earning that median family income. So for many years post Great Recession, we saw that housing affordability continuing to decline. Less and less homes are becoming affordable because the median home price was going up at a faster rate than wages were, right? Wages were stagnant for a long time. And so in the last year, we've actually seen wages increase. So we saw housing affordability actually bump up a little bit. We saw a little bit of an improvement in that. So it's kind of, we've written some really detailed articles in the library on this housing affordability issue, on both cost of living. We take cost of living and we will adjust cost of living. For example, like with teacher wages, we've taken teacher wages and we've adjusted it by cost of living because, we often hear like, teachers in San Diego are paid a lot more, but that's because their cost of living is so much higher. Well, we can adjust that and we can actually look at what is the teacher wage adjusted cost of living to see how we compare when we take cost of living into account. And we've done that in feature articles on the MAP dashboard, and we do that in the teacher wage indicator. But here we've got several through our library, and this is where you find all of those feature articles in our library. We have them broken down into categories. So you've got COVID, economy, infrastructure. And you could go in here, and here we have a housing affordability article I'll show you. So affordable housing in Tucson, it depends. And so we talk here about what's going on in detail, and we'll take that breakdown about wages and in income and cost of living, and we'll look at housing cost burden, and we'll look at really disaggregate that data and break it down and look at, yeah, Tucson's pretty affordable if you earn over 60,000, but what about those that don't earn over 60,000? What about those in that $20,000 to $35,000 income bracket and so on? It's not so affordable, and we look at that in these kind of articles and explore those in depth. And if you're ever interested in a topic, we love to hear from our community members on what types of future articles are needed. What are you interested in? What do you want us to write about? And if we can find the data on it, then we're always happy to consider and to write on these different topics that you guys are interested in. So I don't know, did that answer your question?
Yeah, do your articles address, like, if you don't have the map statistics yet, because it's just not there, for 2020 data, let's say, can you still do some additional research and write about that? Or are you constrained by the data that you have by year?
Yeah, we are constrained by when the data comes out. We do try to look at, with our feature articles, if there's other reports coming out that are kind of suggesting what the trends are looking like we did with evictions. We looked at some reports that were coming out related to COVID-19 and evictions and kind of some of that preliminary data. We're happy to kind of explore that preliminary data. Unfortunately, most of this 2020 data we won't get until the end of the year. And so we are constrained. But if you run across something that you find like preliminary findings for, and you want to send it to us, we can take a look at it and see if it's, if it's a good research project. We can talk about it on the map and how that relates to Tucson.
Great, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Good. Joanne?
I have a question, and let me start with, here's how I'm mentally breaking things out, is that we have Pima County and Tucson households that are receiving income just from their job, whether it's scaled back or not. Then we have things like the unemployment benefits in the stimulus money. My thinking is, when people are using that stimulus money or that extra $600 a week or the extra $300 a week, to me, that's not really our economy doing any better. That's just transferring funds from the government to the individuals. Is there any way to look at that difference or factor out the government money or the unemployment benefits? Am I making sense?
Yeah, when we get the 20, so you're talking when the 2020 data comes out, there'll be kind of a boost, right?
Because, well, example, I have some clients that got that extra $600 a week.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's really showing a recovery in our economy.
Right.
I think that's showing government money being put into the economy. And I'm not judging or saying it's negative. I'm just trying to get my head wrapped around the two differences.
Yeah, I think, George has done more research in this than I have, but from what I understand is that there has been, the money is helping boost the economy, right? People are spending it. So
Yes.
I think it's JP Morgan Chase. George, please jump in and correct me if I'm wrong. I think JP Morgan Chase has looked at how some of this money is being spent, and almost all of it's going back into the economy, which is helping to support our local businesses and, during this time. So I do understand what you're saying, where there may be an artificial boost to income in 2020 because of that. And I don't really know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, right? Because it is helping support the economy at this time. So I think that, that's something that we can write about with the JP Morgan Chase data information. It's something George has looked at in his research for Arizona's economy. So it's something that we can potentially address on the map dashboard as well.
And again, I don't want to sound like I'm judging one way or the other. For me, it's just looking at the numbers differently and the curiosity, or maybe get a better handle on what's really going on.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
just jump in real quickly. That that is something that we can separate out. We know, for instance, that in the second quarter of 2020, the CARES Act injected about $40 billion into Arizona's economy. Around 9 billion of that was UI benefits. About 23 billion was the initial recovery rebates, those $1,200 roughly checks and other one-time payments. So all that data does get tracked and disaggregated in a way that we can separate out what income was generated by wages and other sources and what was generated by those kinds of transfer payments. So that's something we can address.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Very good. Thanks, Jennifer.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I just want to mention, if you ever have any questions or need any more information about the map, please feel free to reach out to me.
All right. Stay warm.
Thanks.
All right. We'll now turn it over to Paki for the second half of this, this item on our agenda.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you, Jennifer. On the MAP dashboard, and now that you've heard a little bit about the MAP dashboard and how the peer communities were selected from an economic perspective, what I'd like to share with you is some research that we did here at PAG related to transportation investment levels in these peer communities. So first, the purpose of me presenting this to you today is just to show you the importance of having dedicated regional funding for infrastructure needs. And also, it's interesting to see how other peer communities compare to our region. Just a disclaimer, the research on the revenue generated for each region only includes regional sales tax revenue dedicated to transportation. Also, there are special district sales taxes, toll fees, and a lot of other funding resources available in some of these peer communities that are not included. And we didn't include those for the purposes of comparing the RTA sales tax type revenues with you. And finally, the annual revenue information presented is the most recent available to date. Finding revenue dedicated to transportation from sales tax is a little challenging. So we put together what we could find, and we hope that you find it of interest. So we'll start with Arizona. So there are two regions in Arizona, as you know, the Greater Phoenix area, which is in Maricopa County, Arizona. The revenue comes from Proposition 400. It's the half-cent sales tax, which equals approximately $492 million. With a population of almost 4.5 million, the per capita ends up being $112. Likewise, here in Tucson, we are under the Pima County, Arizona region. The RTA half-cent sales tax revenue is about $89 million. With our population of 1 million, that translates to about $89 per person. In California, San Diego City is under the San Diego County, California region. And the revenue from there is the half-cent sales tax from the Transnet, which is about $283.5 million. They have a population of 3.3 million, which translates to about $86 per person. In Colorado, there are two regions. We have Colorado Springs and Denver. The Colorado Springs area is under El Paso County, Colorado. The revenue comes from Pikes Peak Rural Transportation Authority, which is a 1% sales tax of about $105 million. The population in this area is about 720,000, which translates to a per capita of about $146. In the greater Denver area, we've got, this includes Denver, Broomfield, Jefferson, Arapahoe, Adams, and Douglas counties in Colorado. This revenue comes from the Regional Transportation District. It's a 1% sales tax, which is equal to about $479 million. Again, with a population of 3 million, it translates to about $160 per person. In Nevada, we've got Las Vegas, which is under the Clark County, Nevada region. The revenue comes from the Regional Transportation Commission. They have a 3/8 cent sales tax, which is about $593.8 million. With a population of about 3 million, the per capita is $198 a person. New Mexico and Albuquerque is part of the greater Albuquerque region. There was no regional sales tax in this area, but just for reference, the population there is about 950,000. And same with Oregon. The Portland area is under, Portland City is under Multnomah County, Oregon. Again, no regional sales tax, and they have a population about 812,855. Texas has 3 different regions. The first is Austin, which is composed of Hays, Travis, and Williamson counties, Texas. The revenue made up from this is from the Capital Metro 1% sales tax, which equaled out to be approximately $261.5 million. The population of this area is about 1.3 million, and the per capita was $201. The other 2 areas in Texas is El Paso, which is under El Paso County, Texas, with a revenue of a county sales tax of .5 cent, equals about $50.7 million. The population in this county is about 830,000, and the per capita is $61. And then San Antonio is under the greater San Antonio, Texas region, which has a population of 2.5 million. But there's no comparable regional sales tax that we could find in this area. Finally, in Utah, Salt Lake City falls under Salt Lake County, Utah. The revenue comes from the Utah Transportation Investment Fund. It's a quarter sales tax, and it's about $227 million. The population in this area is about 1.1 million, and the per capita is $206.
Hey, Pocky,
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but you just said it was a quarter from a sales tax. Did you mean a quarter cent sales
A quarter
tax?
cent, sorry. Yeah, I thought I said cent. Yeah, this is a quarter cent sales tax.
And it produces that much revenue in a population of the same size as us?
This is from the Utah Transportation Investment Fund. So that's what we were able to find, Tom.
Huh, okay. Obviously, they have a higher cost of living as well. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and again, you know, moving forward, this was very interesting research, and we're hoping to get some more information so that we can continue finding more, you know, more of this research and getting the numbers to a more updated information. It was a little challenging to find all of that, but this is what we found for this area. And then what I did is I pulled together all of the peer communities here in this graph. This just summarizes the amount of investment per person per year. And as you can see, a majority of the comparison communities generate more revenue annually, and as a result, the per person per year investment is higher. So this just gives you kind of a snapshot of how our peer communities fall with their regional sales tax dedicated to transportation. So in summary, the takeaway from this presentation is just that regional sales tax funding for transportation has become common practice in recent decades. State and federal funding sources dedicated for regional transportation have been relatively flat since the early 1990s. The Arizona gas tax has remained at 18 cents since 1991, as you all know, and also the federal gas tax has remained at 18.4 cents since 1993. The RTA is the single biggest funder of transportation projects in our region. However, the sales tax revenue varies from region to region, as you saw, And just as a final example, Maricopa County generates 5.5 times more revenue than Pima County, although they have the same half-cent sales tax. So with that, I'll take any questions. This is just an overview of the transportation funding based on the peer communities that Jennifer talked about earlier.
Paki,
Yeah.
this is Carolyn. I found out recently that this is just, I think, interesting to add to the discussion that a couple of months ago in November, the Travis County where Austin is, there was a property tax levy that is bringing in just for transportation, for urban transportation, $7 billion. I said it's not a sales tax, but adding that to what Austin has for their, or I should say Travis County does for their transportation, that is a big boost. And the proposition language basically is for addressing traffic congestion, expand service for essential workers, reduce climate change emissions, decrease traffic fatalities, create jobs, provide access to schools, healthcare, jobs in the airport, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, there's a lot, but they're really working on fixing the issues with sidewalks, bikes, and street lighting, and also a really expanded fixed rail and bus rapid transit system. And I just found that fascinating that 2/3 of the voters in that county said yes to something that is totally for what most people would call like alternate modes. So anyway, that's a really good news to hear about what they did in Travis County.
Yeah, no, thank you, Carolyn, for that information. We did run across some of the peer communities that had the property taxes, but again, for the purposes of this presentation, we were sticking to regional sales tax. But yes, that's good to know that other communities are using other tax dollars to fund transportation incentives.
Mr. Chairman, this is John Bernal.
Go ahead, John.
Paki, just a suggestion for future reporting, maybe. The American Society of Civil Engineers puts together a scorecard every year on infrastructure. It would be interesting to see how these same geographic areas are faring with the level of transportation investment, if there's a way to just jibe those two indicators.
Oh, good. Thanks, John. Thanks for that reference. I will certainly look into that.
Thanks.
Paki, just to make sure I'm seeing this correctly, it looks to me that if Pima County were to change from a half cent to a full cent, as 3 or 4 of the others have, that our per capita would probably be the highest of all of those comparison counties or jurisdictions. It'd be over, well, I guess it'd probably be just about at the top of those others, the same as here.
Yes, as long as our population doesn't increase. But yes, that's correct.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, go ahead, Bruce.
Yeah, Paki, I don't know if I have this correct, but it'd be an interesting point for you to double check on it. I was trying to compare Maricopa County to Pima County, and just based on your conversations, my understanding there's about 2,500 road miles in Maricopa County being supported by 4 million people. And in Pima County, we have about 1,900 road miles being supported by 1 million people. So the burden of effort on the part of us in Pima County is substantially higher than that in Maricopa County. And then when you compare that our per capita expenditures are lower, it really suggests we have a harder road to follow in sustaining support for our roadways. Are those accurate numbers, or do I have that wrong in my head?
I'm going to have to check that, Bruce. The numbers that you just provided me.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a good point. I did not look at that. I was looking specifically at the regional sales tax, but I think you make a good point that the need here is more critical when you look at it that way.
Thanks.
Pocky, I have one question, and it's just, can you send out this data in slides or something after the meeting? And I got a chunk of it down, but I don't think I got it all down.
In addition to the slides, you mean?
Yeah, if you can just send out the slides.
Oh, yeah, definitely. All the presentations will be posted after the meeting.
Thank you.
Thanks for checking, Dale.
Yeah.
Good. Are there any other questions for Pocky?
I have one. It's Joanne.
Okay, go ahead, Joanne.
Hi, Pocky. When we talk about the half cent rate, the money coming in from sales TPT tax, and we're talking about population, are we also factoring into that the amount of roadway? And for example, if does Maricopa County have twice the amount of roadways that it services versus Pima County, or is it 10 times? Or, we look at whether or not things are disproportionate.
I think that's what Bruce was asking about, and I only did this research specifically on the sales tax. So I wasn't looking at the roadway, but I think that would be the next step to look at, Joanne. So thanks for following
Thank
up.
you. No, I'm sorry. What I was hearing Bruce say had to do with her fund. So I'm sorry, Bruce. I didn't mean to restate your question.
You're on mute, Bruce.
Yep. Mr. Chair.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, a quick internet search to Bruce's point shows now that Pima County claims they've got 2,200 road miles versus the 2,500 that Maricopa County claims to maintain as well. So it's really a lot closer in that if you look at the total flow of miles to miles across both those communities, it's understandable, but it's a challenge.
Well, the other difference too is that only 4 or 5% of those roads are actually in the unincorporated county in Maricopa, whereas I would imagine more than half are here. You happen to remember that, John?
Tom, I think actually the 2,200 is strictly unincorporated mileage in Pima County.
Mr. Chair, if I may, for the purpose of comparison, that's definitely a way of looking at it, but keep in mind that you want to look at all funding sources when you start looking at actual road miles to really have an apples and an apples comparison. So that's something that obviously the higher level of detail that we currently don't have, but you do need to break it down and have all the funding sources included in that conversation.
Mr. Chairman?
Go right ahead, Roger.
I would suggest that another way of looking at it is to quantify the number of lane miles.
Yeah, I think that's actually what those numbers are that they've been giving. The number of miles of roadway, I think, are lane miles, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. So again, Mr. Chair, that's doable, but at the same time, it really needs to define all the funding sources and the mix to really be able to get a good comparison.
I'm expecting that at some point in time, that'll be important to the people of our community as they decide whether to spend more money on transportation to understand what all those sources are. And I think perhaps in the future, a little bit more color to this question would be helpful as that becomes available.
Tom, Zarlin.
Yeah.
Just to follow up, it also is important as to if all the jurisdictions are considering the regional network, which is what our sales tax goes to. There are lots and lots of miles out there that are dirt roads between this point and that point, but are not really part of our regional system and are not being supported by our by our sales tax. I am assuming, but I don't know, that that is the same way it's interpreted in the other jurisdictions, but that would make a difference. Otherwise, we're looking at apples and oranges as well. It's actually a smaller road network in totality of what's being funded, what's eligible for funding, as opposed to the entirety of the road network.
Yeah, and I think the makeup of types of roads within jurisdictions is also unique to each of those jurisdictions and helps to tell the story. You know, Pocky has tried to give us some comparisons, but as the more we talk about it, the more we see that the differences really are much greater than the similarities as far as being able to compare. And I think Paul actually in his presentation will hit us with at least one more of those differences, if you will, or uniquenesses of our system versus some others that we might encounter in the West. So any other questions for Pocky before we move on to our last item for today? Very good.
Thank you, everyone. Great questions, and I appreciate the follow-up.
All right, our next item on the agenda is a presentation on transportation technology from Paul Casertano. And I think we've all been anxious to start digging in a little bit on this, but some education and background is really needed, I think, by all of us in order to intelligently place this within our RTA planning process. So without further ado, are you ready for us, Paul? We're ready for you.
Ready, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right. Let's just make sure I've got control here. There we go. All right, Mr. Chair, members of the Citizen Advisory Committee, thanks for having me today. It's a pleasure to be with you. You get me again today, so hopefully that's not too much of a burden, but what we've organized for you is a healthy conversation about transportation technology, what role it has, and some of the questions around what is it and how can we apply it. So we'll go through the entire overview of transportation technology, but it's important to understand what we mean by transportation technology, and almost even more important is how do we plan for it and how do we utilize transportation technology. So I'll introduce you to some of the stuff that you've been hearing in different conversations from us about knowing your issues and knowing the performance of your network as a place to start and a potential area for applying transportation technology. And it is a component of it. It's a toolbox of strategies. It's not going to solve everything for you. We'll provide an overview of some of the technology focus areas here in the region and identify some of the future transportation technology opportunities that appear to be fruitful for us. So what we know about transportation technology is that it can indeed improve transportation. It needs to integrate advanced information and communications-based technologies into the transportation infrastructure, into the vehicles, into the end user devices, and it should focus on improving transportation service. As I alluded to previously, transportation technology is a set of tools. It is not the solution to everything, but it can significantly improve transportation service and transportation performance at a network level and at a local level. Some of the examples that we can provide for you include sensors, traffic signals, vehicles, including both connected and autonomous vehicles, roadside devices, and personal device applications. That is not necessarily the comprehensive list, but it kind of gives you a flavor of the variety or the spectrum of applications we're talking about. So what we're showing here is a graphic from Popular Science from May of 1938. And while PAG and the region have been talking about transportation technology and preparing for it for a good number of years, this isn't ours, but you can see that there has been thought being given to how to apply transportation technology that hasn't yet emerged into the network to improve performance. So we see some good examples here of things that we're seeing in vehicles and the infrastructure today. As we look at what implementation today looks like, we see some of these functions from the previous slide being implemented. So we see smart streetlights and communications infrastructure to support all of these elements. We see aspects of the shared economy being rolled out, both from alt modes, bicycle shared economy, as well as vehicles and other transportation services, transportation network companies. We see connected transit, connected vehicles. We see applications in smart parking. And then we also have to recognize that we want to look at all modes and make sure that pedestrians and bicyclists have the information necessary for them to accommodate their transportation needs in a safe and efficient way throughout the network.
I noticed, Paul, that we don't have, or maybe you just left it off, that jet exhaust dispelling fog along the roadway. I thought that was genius.
Yeah, I did catch that one, especially where there's tunnel applications for signage and whatnot. That's really, there's so much growth and ideas being put into this sector of transportation. It's really an incredibly exciting time. But one word of caution that I'll kind of share with you is I've been talking with the jurisdictional and other stakeholders about intelligent transportation systems and planning for that and transportation technology for 20 years now. And the real nut to crack here is what do you apply and how do you apply it so that it improves performance of the network or your local conditions and doesn't then become a burden on the owning agency in terms of maintenance and execution. So we need to keep that in mind. We need to look at this set of tools as valuable pieces to help us address the challenges of transportation. Lots of great ideas out there, no doubt. One thing I wanted to make sure to bring to your attention is communications infrastructure. We'll get into that in a little bit, but we recognized early on that this is a component that needs to be robust enough to support a wide variety of these transportation technology services. So we've tried to step into that area and embrace that a little bit more aggressively and support both the public and private side to help them do that. So the question really becomes, how do we plan for and utilize transportation technology, as I was alluding to? And what we've learned is the focus really should be on performance of the transportation network and improving the capabilities of the network itself. Certainly we need to address all user needs, from drivers to transit to transportation network companies to alternate mode users, to households without vehicles. The entire gamut of transportation profile needs to be addressed. We've learned that we need to avoid technology for technology's sake. There are a lot of cool things out there, but a lot of times we need to check ourselves and make sure that the application of those cool things is the right application and it's going to improve the transportation network service or performance. We need to adapt, certainly, and as a government entity with membership of government entities, we can do better at that. We're trying to collaborate with the private side and be a little bit more nimble as we move forward, but we have to avoid investing in dead-end technology. So we need to make sure that we're vetting these types of technologies and their application, and we're not necessarily on the very front end of adapting these, but we are doing our due diligence to make sure that they are indeed proven technologies and they will improve performance. The last point here is incredibly important. What we've learned over the years is that transportation technology initiatives, the infrastructure that supports them, the data needs surrounding them, the implementation and management that's required really must be actively managed by experts. This is not a set it and forget it type of initiative or set of tools. This is an active management of transportation network service and performance that needs experts and needs constant caring. So as we get deeper into how do we plan for and implement transportation technologies, we like to bring to enter through the doorway of performance measures and performance planning. So you've heard from us about our performance tracking that we have institutionalized here in the region. And we feel that's a really effective way to understand where the opportunity areas for improvement are, and then look a little deeper to see if those opportunity areas might be ripe for transportation technology services as a potential tool to help transportation performance. So you've seen some of the reporting that we've provided. We've gotten considerably better at being able to monitor our network needs and our performance. This is getting better and better through collaborative ventures with stakeholders, our member agencies and others who are very interested in getting a better and clearer understanding of the network performance and understanding how to address the transportation challenges that face our region. So this will continue, and it is a really vital piece to understanding where those opportunities for improvement exist and getting to the point of how to improve those opportunity areas. Transportation technology will no doubt be an effective tool set to help do it. And so the better we know about our network's performance, the more we know, the more effectively we can apply those tools. So with that, we like to provide some understanding of the issues that are facing our region. We went through a little bit of this last month, so some of this may be a refresher. Traffic congestion. We know our regional profile is a bit different from some of those peer communities you heard about earlier. Congestion in large part is event-based. It's temporary. The peak period congestion of AM and PM is fairly predictable. Some of the non-predictable stuff includes incidents, special events, and those types of things that knowing more acutely what the performance of your network is looking at in a real-time basis will allow preparation and management of the network to better manage those types of events that happen. So we must be able to manage our congestion spikes. As you heard from Jennifer earlier, our travel time reliability is fairly stable, but transportation technology can bring efficiencies to the entire network, and those will translate down to individuals. So when we look at travel times specifically, we do see a gradual increase. Our average commute is 24.5 minutes. This is 2016 data, so we hadn't pulled the most current in there, but you get the idea. We see that disparity between vehicle commute times and average transit trips. We talked about that last month. Knowing more details about that provides us an opportunity to see if we can bridge that gap to be something that's a little bit more, maybe not perfectly aligned, but competitive, so that then transit might become a better option for choice travelers. And then we see in our regional network a wide variety of trip lengths and travel times. We see a mix of very short trips. Many of these are being done by vehicles. There may be opportunity for pedestrian, bicycle, transit use for the shorter trip. So the more we understand about those issues and how travel times are impacting our region, the more effectively we can provide or apply the right tools. You heard this from us last month. We have a huge reliance on our arterial roadways. No other region with a million plus population has higher VMT on its arterial network. We did hear from one of our colleagues about there is a location in Florida that escapes me off the top of my head that's right in there with us, so they understand our challenges. What we know is expanding roadway capacity becomes incredibly expensive because of the cost of right-of-way acquisition in the urban core. So there may be opportunities to see what kind of improvements can take place before that right-of-way acquisition. We're not saying that transportation technology is going to solve everything. There will be roadway expansion needs, but if they're coupled with transportation technology and transportation management approaches, they can even be more effective, or they can be deferred to a later stage in time. We know from the arterial network that this provides us with a good opportunity for alternate routes. So we don't see a huge impact from traffic incidents on our arterial roadway in terms of overall congestion and traffic delays and things of that nature, because we do see the distribution of travel around that incident has a lot of different options due to that robust arterial network that exists in the region. So now we'll kind of shift into some of the transportation technology focus areas that I'll provide you a little bit of information, an overview first of transportation system management and what we mean about that, and then going into a few other focus areas to give you a flavor of some of the activities that are happening here locally that provide an opportunity for expansion or continuation. So when we're talking about transportation systems management, we're looking at a wide variety of initiatives that can be brought to bear and fall under the banner of transportation systems management. Perhaps most important for us is traffic signal coordination, and we'll get into that in a moment. But you see a variety of other strategies that fall under system management that can indeed be very effective tools for helping manage the network. One of these is traffic incident management that has had quite a bit of focus on the national front, where response agencies, both from the emergency service side and the transportation side, are focused on quick response and quick clearance in order to restore the network back to its previous pre-incident performance level. We see transit being in this fold, certainly, freight, travel information, which I'll get into later, improved bicycle and pedestrian service, including crossings and other network issues. Micro mobility services are becoming much more popular as a transportation option. And then finally, connected and automated vehicle deployment, which is coming fast. So as we look at our traffic signal network, back to that arterial network reliance, we know that more than 70% of all VMT is happening on that traffic signal network. in our region, we see nationally that roughly 10% of all traffic delay can be attributed to poor traffic signal timing. We recognized that some years ago, and we've worked closely with our jurisdictional entities to create a program that more frequently and proactively looks at traffic signal timing throughout the region to see where those opportunities for improvement might be. What we know about our congestion profile in the region is that a good portion of our congestion is localized to the intersection level. So this is part of the arterial network profile itself, but we see that that is where the congestion seems to be popping up. And so there may be opportunities to help alleviate that. When we look at traffic signals, we're talking about more than just signal heads. We're talking over 20 pieces of hardware and software at each individual signalized intersection operating 24/7. Sad to say, but it is an interesting fact. Some of these pieces of equipment are older than I am. They're still operating properly. There's not a firm requirement to replace them because they're still operating. But if we want to look at embracing transportation technology, we need to look at regular updating of that equipment, both the hardware and the software side. We know that roughly half of the regional traffic signal hardware and software is in need of replacement. So we need to pay some attention there. I know the operators would say the same. And regular investment in that area will provide better opportunity to embrace transportation technology opportunities for the signal network itself. That will translate to efficiencies at the traffic signal level for all travelers, and then also efficiencies on being able to provide signal priority for different service levels, thinking about emergency service, freight, transit, and the like. At this point, what we see is emergency vehicles use a preempt, so they completely disrupt the operation of the network at a particular signal, and then that signal has to go through a recovery phase. If we can prepare that signal for the arrival of that emergency vehicle or transit vehicle or freight vehicle, it will mean less disruption to that signal and less disruption to the coordination of the entire network. So I mentioned earlier, communications is a huge part of this equation. We know that currently there's standard and outdated technology here in the region. Communications is a vital component to supporting traffic signals as well as emergency services, I should add. Ideally, when you talk with folks, it would be dreamy to have a fiber connection to each and every field device, including traffic signals and other sensors and things. That's just not really reality. So it needs to look like a hybrid mix where there is a robust fiber network, fiber backbone with wireless service to rely on that fiber backhaul. It does create the foundation for a majority of the transportation technology improvements, and it is a necessity. It is required for coordinated traffic signal control and use in signal priority and traffic adaptive execution. We've seen over the years where there have been some communications issues with the network where we thought that signals were operating in coordination and in harmony. However, some of these signals would have drop-offs from the network, and then they would fall out of sync with the signals around them. There would be clock slippage and things of that nature. So we're working diligently to improve that, but there's still a lot of work to be done in order to make sure that the communications network that supports signal operations and other transportation services is robust enough to deal with that. So shifting now, just to give you a little overview of some of the other technology initiatives that have been happening in the region. Recently, PAG RTA, in coordination with Suntran, implemented a pilot service for the Rita Ranch area using a mobile application to meet customer needs and provide travel options for a pilot group of travelers. So this included an execution of a mobility as a service platform that customers could use. It was quite a significant learning process for our folks, but really the takeaway here is that it has established a foundation for the expansion of mobility services, not only as a component of what travelers expect, but our ability to be able to pull that off is going to be increasingly important as we look at transportation solutions moving forward. This is where I would love to be in the same room as many of you today, because what I would do is I would ask you how many of you have recently or ever heard a traffic report on the radio or television. And then I would see a lot of hands go up. And what I would say is that you are consuming our regional travel information TransView service, where PAG has worked with jurisdictions, including DOTs and emergency dispatch folks, to provide real-time information about traffic incidents that come through the dispatch system. We serve that up in a rebroadcast type of opportunity so that we can get to the travelers on the platform that you're using. We don't expect you to come to us necessarily. We want it to be valuable information that you can become aware of to impact your travel choices and provide you the best available real-time information about traffic incidents, construction information, weather, traffic data. We also provide modal connections and information about parking, transit, bicycle, pedestrian, and the like. So we'll continue to get into or to expand those services, but we've seen traveler information become a really important tool in the toolbox to impact those travel choices on the network and really shift the burden on the transportation network around these types of issues that are taking place. So as we turn our attention to some of the emerging technologies, we recognize that emerging means that it has breached the surface, no doubt. So now we kind of shift to connected and autonomous vehicles. We know that we need to continue to prepare for the introduction of autonomous and connected vehicles. The real struggle from the DOT side, the infrastructure side, becomes how most effectively to do that. And so that continuous and ongoing monitoring and investment in the capabilities, the hardware and software, the communications infrastructure, that's really where the focus needs to be in order to allow for the opportunity for interaction between connected autonomous vehicles and traffic signals and other field equipment. So that we're ripe and ready for efficient benefits that will come from connected and autonomous vehicles. Fortunately, Arizona is a hotbed for both connected and autonomous vehicle testing. So we're getting more and more involved in that, and we see a lot of opportunities to learn from folks throughout the state. We know that over 90% of crashes are caused by human error. There's a significant potential for autonomous vehicles to help that, but how that actually plays out, there's a lot still left to discover there. We know that there's liability concerns that need to be addressed, and so we're stepping cautiously, but keeping our eye on this growth area, no doubt. When we look at public concerns with autonomous vehicles and technology, we see that impact on travel patterns from autonomous vehicles and transportation network companies like Uber and Lyft that will undoubtedly begin to merge into driverless network services. What those impacts will exactly look like kind of remains to be seen. And some of it is related to the policy adoption of how those types of technologies are rolled out. We know that there's no legal precedent, so we're watching very closely. We know that autonomous and connected vehicles will impact the workforce and the economy, but it's a little uncertain how. I'm sure that some of you have recently seen the announcement from Too Simple about the expansion of autonomous truck services here in the region. Whether that's going to provide efficiencies on the network and improve workforce and economy or steal jobs, that becomes a debate for another time. But it's not as simple as a one-sided answer there. We know that. We know that access and adoption profiles for autonomous and connected vehicles and transportation network companies will impact travel patterns. Are we looking at 10% of the network fleet? Are we looking at 30%? What does that adoption rate look like? And how are those services then provided for folks that may not even have a license? We have an aging population. We know we have plenty of traveler needs for non-licensed youth. How does the policy apply for those types of folks in the region? So lots of unknowns there. So as we look forward, we're trying to keep our eyes focused on improved data for transportation system performance. We know that if we have better data and we apply it in the right way, it should result in better transportation service. So we've established great relationships with both public and private folks here in the region and elsewhere to foster that collaboration. There's tremendous growth in this area where we can get a better sense of what the real-time performance of the network looks like, and we can act accordingly. We have gotten better at utilizing smartphone and anonymized location-based services as a vital component of better understanding transportation performance throughout the network. We recently have done some preliminary analysis about impacts from COVID and a lot of the telework that's happening. We've seen new things that we never saw before because of this new data set. We're seeing surprisingly that some of the vehicle miles traveled have gotten back to pre-pandemic levels pretty quickly, but we're seeing a shift of types of trips that are happening. So you don't any longer see that commute from home to work trip. You see more neighborhood trips, and that may be potentially delivery of goods and services to the home by businesses. So the profile is changing, and the better understanding that we have on the data that helps us realize this, the better position we'll be in. And that will lead to smarter investments to improve our network performance. So we've made some great efforts on this front in helping our analysis and modeling capabilities here for the region. You heard a little bit about this last month, but what we're looking at is now we're migrating from a trip-based travel model to an activity-based travel model that is allowing us to examine the potential impacts of some of those things that we just talked about, some of the autonomous vehicle fleet saturation issues, transportation network companies. Our better understanding of how that might impact our network performance is very key for informing where our investment opportunities may exist. So as we look forward, we know that there's a tremendous amount of opportunity for engaging in transportation technology. we would like to make sure that the focus continues to be on improving service and improving the performance of the network. We know that there's opportunities there, but we need to keep our eyes focused on that, and we need to invest in our ability to continue to track the impact of these types of investments. We know that we stand to enhance safety significantly. We can improve the traffic signal network extensively. We see there's a lot of opportunity there. We also know that connected and autonomous vehicles are coming, and they're coming fast. And our preparation for how to prepare for that is very vital to our success. We know that we need to assess and validate emerging transportation technologies prior to their adoption. This is the, we can't adapt to dying technologies per se. So we need to be good stewards in that realm. And then if we can maintain and improve our command on a data-driven, performance-based approach to understanding the performance of our network, that will really be a vital component to our ability to employ transportation technology tool set to improve our transportation network performance as a whole. So I'll leave you with that. Certainly there's more to be said, but hopefully that gave you a good flavor of the spectrum of what we're talking about, where there may be some opportunity areas and some of the focus that we'd like to keep your eyes on in terms of transportation technology for improved network efficiencies, improved performance, and not just for the sake of investing in technology. So I'm happy to take any questions or follow up as needed. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Paul. I have a couple of kind of basic questions that perhaps I could throw out at you at this point. Are all the jurisdictions now installing fiber on all of their arterial projects? I'm asking that also to understand that, what the latest thinking is about the communication technologies that will be utilized most likely for connected and autonomous vehicle preparation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There's really been a newfound realization for the need to invest in communications infrastructure. In the past, we had seen quite a disconnect between IT and DOT departments, not necessarily being on the same page in terms of the need for that investment. So there have been opportunity gaps that have been left without communications infrastructure of fiber or conduit, but it seems as though the local agencies are really waking up to that need, and we're trying to encourage that consideration. So there's a lot more coordination happening on that front. In terms of, is it absolutely happening every time? I think we can do a little bit better, but there appears to be a desire to do better. So I think it's a bright future there.
And does it look like fiber or 5G or a combination is most likely the network that will be needed for these connected vehicles at least?
Roughly saying, I think that's right. So you're likely to see a robust fiber backbone on which 5G will exist, and the backhaul of that data will take place on fiber, but the 5G hotspots will basically be propped up on that fiber network, and there will be a codependent relationship there, certainly.
Yeah, and how much that changes in the next 20 years is a totally different topic. Related to this though, tell us a little bit about signal equipment throughout the region. Are we all using the same equipment? Is there, I know a few years ago, the preempt equipment was wildly different from agency to agency. And just wonder how we're doing as a region in pulling together, a common equipment catalog that would allow us easier interconnection and intercommunication.
Fortunately, Mr. Chair, we have had a great group of practitioners to work with over the years, and they are very interested in not having to reinvent the wheel. So where there are opportunities for common equipment, they seek those as much as possible. They like to learn from one another. There are some still some challenges that exist. Preemption is one of those. What we're seeing in some of the new requirements coming out of the Manual for Uniform Traffic Control Devices, which essentially is the rule book by which operators need to follow to do traffic signals and signage and things of that nature, is there will continue to be more of a requirement to migrate to priority service in place of preemption. And there's still issues around the requirement to fully serve the pedestrian crossing during that period. So there's a lot of issues. And this is where the jurisdictional entities are a little bit timid to dive right in because they want to see what the lay of the land looks like. Fortunately, through conversations that we have helped foster, they're very coordinated on this issue. So we attempt to help them stay in tune with what's happening at the national level and how it will impact their management and operations at the local level. And they want to be on the same page. They're not exactly there on all fronts per se, but we have a good dialogue and a good coordinated relationship with them.
Yeah, with a large number of, well, we have a relatively small number of jurisdictions here compared to, say, Maricopa County, but it's still plenty and it's got to be a challenge. Yeah. Okay, other questions for Paul?
Mr. Chair, Brian Keeley.
Go ahead, Brian.
Paul, thank you very, very much, first of all, for that presentation. You have my full support on this. I think technology, and when we're looking at the dates for this plan, as rapidly as technology changes, it's something you're always chasing, it seems like anyways, but the sooner we get a head start, less likely we'll just continue to get further and further behind. And especially on that preemption and traffic control and all that, I think it's a very important element to this overall plan. And so I just want to say thank you for bringing it forward. And, I certainly am in full support of really analyzing this as part of the larger plan. So thank you.
Wonderful, certainly.
Mr. Chair, I got a question.
Ted.
So Paul, great presentation. We all know there's a lot of incredible technologies that are coming our way and things are moving rapidly, especially in the automated vehicle industry and the connected vehicle industry. Have you seen how any other plans, RTAs, or any of the things like that, the different cities that have brought in, how they've managed to insert technology in their plan when you are talking a 20-year timeframe? Because the ability to install some of these capabilities, in the first quarter of a 20-year plan is going to be completely different than the last quarter. But how do you go to the voter and say, this is where we're going to spend your money and how we're going to spend it? Are there any examples of that out in the US?
That really becomes the question, doesn't it? We haven't looked explicitly at voter approved packages per se, but we certainly have paid attention to long range plans and other investment programs. And there really does need to be some element of flexibility built into it. And so we know that the technology we're going to invest in year 15 of a program is yet unknown. But do we know what we're aiming for? Are we looking for improvements to the traffic signal network? Are we trying to provide travel information services? Are we trying to provide emergency service for Brian and others so that they can more effectively understand real-time route options for quick arrival to an incident scene? So we like to focus on the service and the area as much as possible. And the way we've laid it out, like in our RMAP long-range transportation plan, is we've said we know that there's traffic signal improvements that are going to happen all the way through 2045, but we don't know exactly what those are. So we have a category for traffic signal improvements, and then we work closely with our jurisdictions to determine what are the needs, what's the best, most recent proven technology, and how can we get them all on the same page so that we can provide that seamless uniformity for the transportation network, so that we don't see a Marana doing something different from Pima County, doing something different from the city of Tucson. So it's certainly a challenge. There's not really a straightforward answer. We have begun to see some coalitions and some programs pop up where there's ongoing evaluation of potential projects, and there's even investment in pilot projects. This is not necessarily using sales tax funding per se. I imagine you could do that, but I guess put that aside for a moment. Folks are recognizing that they need to look at pilot implementations to better understand what the potential impacts are. So there's seed funding being put toward examining what the impacts of a pilot program might look like, and then an evaluation of that pilot program for traffic adaptive signals was pretty darn successful. Let's go more aggressively into traffic adaptive signals. And now we know these are the parameters by which we should apply traffic adaptive signals. It's not everywhere. It's where we have these special situations or conditions. So that's going to be what governs projects getting funding for traffic adaptive signal, for example.
And I would imagine that funding region-wide is tricky as well, because I don't know what the percentage is, but I would guess that 2/3 of the signals in the region are inside the city of Tucson. Although, you know, all the jurisdictions have signals, would seem like the largest share would be within the city, even though their population is, you know, only 40 or 45%.
That's pretty darn close, Mr. Chair. Fortunately, we've seen great early coordination. So some years ago, we like to point to the fact that we were one of the first metropolitan areas of our size that had, I think it was all but 13 of the traffic signals in a coordinated network. So where the city of Tucson went, we helped foster discussion with the other jurisdictions that it would be better to have a fully coordinated network, and you as individual agencies still have control over your signal operations, but we know what the performance looks like from regardless of ownership. So we can understand where there's opportunities to improve signal timing, to improve efficiencies and other things.
It's exciting. Bruce, did you have a comment or a question?
Yeah, I do. First of all, thanks. That was a great presentation. Really very helpful. I wanted to sort of follow up on Ted's question and comment. It seems to me that as a committee, we face two policy implications coming out of this discussion. The first is, do we need to have a policy requirement that the local jurisdictions embed the necessary technology improvements in the projects they're bringing forward for consideration? That is, if they fund, for instance, the extension of the appropriate fiber or whatever. So, I mean, to me, it seems that we need to confront that issue up front. And then the second one is the point that Ted made, and that is, what kind of mechanism can we come up with to allow the flexibility to reallocate, reprogram, or allocate funding for technology that we can't even anticipate at this particular point in time? So I guess my request would be at some point when we get into the discussion of the overall plan that those two issues be rostered for discussion.
Yeah.
Very good.
Great points. I can't speak to the necessity of requirement of design features and things of that nature, but we certainly do like to see consistent investment when it comes to technology investments. So I know the jurisdictional practitioners have been in support of that. It somewhat depends on the weight with which you can imply that so that it is done consistently every time. We've seen projects in areas where it just hasn't happened. And so then you have kind of a hole in your network per se. As we look to incorporate technology into the first version of the RTA program, I was there at that point. We initially looked at our intelligent transportation systems planning that was relatively fresh at the time. And we tried to first take the approach of providing opportunity in some of those transportation system management areas that you saw. So transit management and arterial traffic management, freeway management, travel information, those types of services that we're talking about. That became a little bit too broad for the technical management committee. And so then it was narrowed down to, well, let's invest in traffic signal issues. And so then there was a set aside categorical of, I believe, $15 million over the 20-year period to allow for investments in traffic signal technology. What those investments exactly were, we coordinated that with our Transportation Systems and Safety Subcommittee to figure out, are we talking traffic signal controllers? Are we talking communications upgrade, preemption equipment? And that's how we tried to foster that. So we tried to build in that flexibility while still being prescriptive as possible to say, this is what this categorical element will allow for.
Certainly not easy. All right, other questions?
I have one.
Go ahead, Joanne.
Hi, do we have any idea if once we start to modernize, is the federal government going to kick money into the states to help with these technology updates? Or do we have somebody monitoring that in one of the federal committees?
Those are great questions. I think the answer to both of those is yes. We see continued interest and investment in this area from the federal side. And this will translate beyond just system management to alternate fuels and alternate fuel infrastructure and, broader smart city, smart region opportunity areas. So we're seeing growth there. We're seeing interest from the federal government. We do have folks on some of the subcommittees, including connected and autonomous vehicles. So we're watching that very closely, and we're trying to stay tuned into where those opportunity areas for investment are.
Good, thank you. And thanks, Paul. Great presentation. I think timely and as comprehensive, I think, as you could afford to do without having the whole day to use. So thanks again. We're just about at the end of our typical 2-hour block. I wanted to let everyone know that we do have a second meeting that'll be on the 25th, 2 weeks from today. Same time, same station. And also wanted to thank staff for the presentations today, as well as for the Zoom platform, at least for me, and it seemed to me for the ability to conduct the meeting that it was superior to what we've been working with previously. So I appreciate that. At our next meeting, we will have some presentations on freight and shipping so that we can see how those impact the planning process and what we'll be doing. And then also we'll start talking about ADOT projects and their methods of financing and funding those projects as well as their priorities. So any last comments for the good of the group?
Mr. Chair, it's Bruce.
Yes.
Maybe I was asleep at the switch, but have we received the City of Tucson's priority list? I know that they were supposed to act upon it in December, and I'm just wondering what the status of that is.
Yeah, we have not yet received that. We do have the recommendations, or we have copies of the recommended projects as presented to the council, but they continue to debate certain aspects of the process, and we're hoping that in the next couple of meetings that we'll have that together from them. But as of now, we do not have those.
Thank you.
All right, thanks everyone for your attention and participation today. And we'll see you all again in 2 weeks. And as chair, I will take the prerogative of declaring our meeting closed and adjourned. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Tom.